Tonight, TINDERBOX. The abortion debate stirs protests across the country. Plus, gas prices reaching record highs. An emerging threat.
We have a computer that can try every combination in a matter of seconds. We need to be ahead of this curve.
Quantum computing set to change the cybersecurity realm. And teachers, parents, and students caught in the nation's culture war find an alternative to the classroom drama.
It's our responsibility to provide the Christian education of our children, not the government.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Stark division in the United States as the abortion debate explodes into the open.
This is rising inflation takes its toll on the home front. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation. But tonight we begin with abortion and threats of violence aimed at pro-life groups and churches. Protesters also continuing to gather outside the homes of Supreme Court justices. And tonight, Justice Samuel Alito and his family now reportedly moved to an undisclosed location for their safety.
Justice Alito wrote the leaked draft opinion that signals the end of Roe v. Wade. The nationwide unrest now spilling here in Washington over to Capitol Hill, where Democrats are working to make abortion the law of the land. CBN's Brody Carter here now with tonight's top story. Brody.
John Jenna, churches and pro-life centers remain on high alert as protests and vandalism are expected to grow following violence over the Mother's Day weekend. If abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either. That threat left by vandals who broke windows and threw Molotov cocktails into the Wisconsin Family Action office. Anarchy 1312 took responsibility for the arson attempt, leaving its logo on an outside wall. On Twitter, Wisconsin Family Action stating the attack only furthers their mission, saying, "We will not back down. Too much is at stake." The violence follows a week of protest and vandalism outside churches and synagogues nationwide. It's all sparked by the leaked draft of the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Keep abortion safe and legal.
Marchers also demonstrated outside the homes of Justice Brett Kavanaugh and Chief Justice John Roberts. After a week of silence, the White House strongly denounced the arson in Wisconsin, saying, quote, President Biden strongly condemns this attack and political violence of any stripe. It goes on to say Americans have the right to express themselves under the Constitution, but that expression must be peaceful and free of violence, vandalism, or attempts to intimidate. If the Supreme Court votes to overturn Roe v. Wade, abortion will become illegal in 26 states, more than half the U.S. The decision is expected by June or early July. In the meantime, Senate Democrats have scheduled a vote for Wednesday that would legalize abortion up to the day before birth.
We're one of 7 nations in the world that allow abortion on demand at 20 weeks, the 5th month in pregnancy.
While Senator Lindsey Graham expects that attempt to fail, the goal is designed to get each senator on record about abortion rights ahead of the November election. Democrats believe this could change the course of the midterms. Others disagree.
I don't believe it's going to change the outcome of the 2022 elections at all.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says in theory it's possible Republicans could seek a nationwide ban on abortion if the GOP takes back control of the Senate. His sentiment more so stressing the importance of getting out and voting in the midterms. Brody Carter, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Brody. On the economy tonight, already high gas prices and energy prices ticking up even higher. And on Wall Street, stocks took another major tumble today, extending last week's losses. To combat skyrocketing inflation, the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates to reduce the amount of money in circulation. After raising interest rates by 0.25% last month, the Fed says it's time for an even steeper hike to avoid a recession. But just as higher prices have hit Americans in nearly every sector of the economy, higher rates are going to cause some problems too, with everything from mortgage rates to rates on credit cards set to go up.
And joining us now, CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, always great to see you. So tomorrow, the president gives a major speech on inflation. Clearly, David, the economy shaping up to be among the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue for voters heading into the midterms.
Yeah, for sure. And so clearly the White House wants to get, I don't want to say ahead of that. I mean, they're already kind of behind it, but they want to do something to show that, hey, we're not only serious about this, but we can fix the problem. And Joe Biden knows he has to fix the problem or they're in big trouble. And let's be honest, they're in big trouble regardless of anything from an economic perspective. But look, what is he going to say? I mean, at some point, there's just too much water in the what is it, the wagon? I don't know where the water is, but the point is there's a lot of it. And that's the problem for Joe Biden. Look, the consumer price index will come out on Wednesday morning. That's going to be very important. Inflation's at about 8.5% now. They expect it to, in essence, be at about 0.2%, which will lower inflation to 8.1%. That's the hope for the Biden administration, that they can have the speech, then come out with a better number on Wednesday and use that as some momentum as they move forward.
David, on abortion, Democrats are scheduling a sure-to-fail vote on Wednesday on a measure that would codify legalized abortion into law. How galvanizing is this issue for Democrats, and is it enough to overcome the economic concerns of voters?
Well, it's a great question, Jenna. Look, they're going to say it's going to galvanize their base, but let's unpack that for a second. What does that mean, their base? Well, their progressive base is about maybe 20% of the country, maybe tops. So you're going to motivate 20% of your base. Well, good for you. But what about the independents that you're losing? And this is the issue for the Biden administration. I mean, you can't go around, and chant pro-abortion, pro-abortion, pro-abortion. That's not going to do the trick with independents, especially as midterms come around. And of course, you mentioned the economy as well. So I think it's an overshot by the Democrats to think that all of a sudden this is going to mobilize them. Yes, it'll mobilize them from an active standpoint. We've seen that because we have, this just in, Justice Alito in hiding. So indeed, it's going to motivate them from an activist standpoint. But will it really motivate them in the polls? It will to a degree. The problem is they don't have the numbers from the progressive standpoint to make as much of a difference as they think.
On the other side of the debate, David, as we just heard Brady Carter report, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell told USA Today over the weekend that a federal ban on abortion could be possible, even more so if Republicans reclaim control of the Senate this fall. In about 30 seconds or so, David, could a move like this backfire?
Oh, 100%. I mean, what is Mitch McConnell doing? Sorry, that's analysis, I guess, to a degree. I mean, really? Why would you even go there? First of all, you never answer a hypothetical in politics, number one. Number two, Republicans already have like this perception among voters that they're kind of, radical, either, this way on abortion only, just like the Democrats have it on the other side. So why would you even introduce potentially something like this into the conversation? Bad move to even suggest anything like that by Mitch McConnell, even though he believes his words were taken out of context. By the way, the water was in the boat. I just want to let you know. I finally figured it out.
All right. All right, David, thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks, David.
Good to see you guys.
Turning now overseas to Moscow, where Russian President Vladimir Putin attempted once again to justify his war with Ukraine, drawing unfounded parallels between the bloody campaign in Ukraine to the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. At the Grand Military Parade on Red Square, observers noted what Putin did not say, leaving out any mention of a further escalation in Ukraine. Russian forces are still trying to capture a steel mill in the city of Mariupol, where an estimated 2,000 Ukrainian fighters are making their last stand.
Ellie Kohanim is the former deputy special envoy to combat anti-Semitism, and she joins us now. Ellie, welcome to Faith Nation. So in his speech, Putin defended Russia's war on Ukraine as a fight against Nazis. Of course, just last week, we saw comments from the Russian foreign minister connecting Adolf Hitler to Judaism. I'd like to start by just getting your reaction to these comments.
Jenna, good to be with you. Putin's constant bringing up of Nazis and the Holocaust is really an insult to the 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust. And last week, as you mentioned, Foreign Minister Lavrov of Russia actually went on to say that Hitler might have some Jewish descent or Jewish blood, which is something that historians have completely proven to be untrue. In fact, his remarks brought condemnation from all across the Jewish world and from Israel's prime minister and foreign minister, such that Putin himself apologized to Israel this week. So what the Russians need to do is they need to stop trying to justify their war by bringing up the Holocaust and the evil of the Nazis. There's just no comparison between their invasion of the Ukraine and the history of the Holocaust.
There is a series of people unsuccessfully trying to connect the Holocaust to whatever their issues are, and it just doesn't seem to work. Ellie, I want to turn now to, as we were just talking about, Israel. 2 Palestinian suspects were arrested Sunday in the killing of 3 people in a stabbing attack last week. It is among the latest in a series of deadly attacks, including a police officer who was stabbed in the neck. What accounts for the recent surge in violence, Ellie?
John, you know what we saw was in the last month, the holidays of Ramadan, Passover, and Easter all overlapped. And unfortunately, while that could have been a time of peaceful coexistence, what we saw was a tremendous amount of incitement against Jews by the Palestinian leadership right at Israel and Judaism's holiest site, which is the Temple Mount, also known as the Al-Aqsa Mosque. There were people chanting Khaybar, Khaybar Ya Yahud, which is a call for genocide against Jews in Arabic. And so it is unfortunately not a surprise when you see young Palestinians taking terrorist actions in response to all this incitement. And the world community really needs to be holding the Palestinian leadership responsible and accountable.
All right, Ellie Kohanim, former Deputy Special Envoy to Combat Anti-Semitism. Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you.
Coming up, the cyber threat of the future. So concerning it has lawmakers on both sides of the aisle coming together to combat the emerging threat that doesn't even exist yet.
Welcome back. A bipartisan group of lawmakers is racing against time to pass legislation that could help protect America against a cyber threat of the future. It's called quantum computing, supercomputers that can break through secure encryption codes in just a matter of seconds.
Though the technology doesn't actually exist now, experts warn if we wait until it does, it'll be too late. Here's CBN's national security correspondent Caitlin Burke with more.
Encryption algorithms allow us to keep sensitive information secure when taking care of business or shopping online. Breaking these codes is nearly impossible, allowing governments and private citizens alike to depend on them. The emergence of quantum computing could put an end to that security.
Imagine you have a computer that can try every combination and can try hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these combinations in a matter of seconds. Well, they'll be able to break through that code, and they can break through the encryption. And this is the threat that quantum computing poses.
Congressman Ro Khanna, along with a bipartisan group of lawmakers, recently introduced legislation that would require a strategy be put in place to provide federal systems with quantum-resistant encryption. It's also supported by several big tech companies, including Google and IBM.
And what they're saying is, for us to protect your data, for us to make sure that your information is secure, we need to be ahead of this curve. They don't want people cracking their code.
Although experts admit this technology is far from operational, evidence shows American adversaries are already stealing data in order to decrypt it once quantum computers are online.
They wait however long, maybe 10 years, 15 years, until there's a quantum computer, and then they can get access to your data. Now, some of that data, 10 years down the road, that's okay, but there's certain information that by law or by national security interests, we need to protect for a long time. So they would get access to your data before you would want them to.
The National Institute for Standards and Technology has the responsibility of creating quantum-resistant encryption. One additional challenge will be that successful prevention can't be determined until it's tested by a functioning quantum computer.
We don't know how fast a quantum computer will be. We don't know exactly how expensive it will be to run. So it's a little bit tricky to try and pick parameters to protect against that.
Still, after a decade of research, NIST teams believe they've cracked the code.
We launched basically a big international competition where we solicited the cryptographic community around the world to design new crypto systems, which would be safe from quantum computers.
They then evaluated each submission, choosing several considered to be the most promising. Dustin Moody from the NIST Computer Security Division says in just a matter of weeks, those algorithms will be standardized and rolled out.
For the average person, this will be handled kind of behind the scenes. You know, their browsers on the internet will start using the new technology, the products that companies are using. They'll start using it.
The hope is that in a decade or so, when these supercomputers come along, the new encryption algorithms hold, allowing sensitive data to stay secure and out of the hands of our enemies. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Goodbye classroom drama. Up next, families across the country finding alternatives to public school. Families are fleeing public schools all across the country. Loudoun County, in the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C., has been ground zero for parents' outrage over school policies.
In response, a local Virginia pastor is spearheading a multi-million-dollar project to offer Christian-based education. CBN's Tara Mergener brings us the details.
Nestled in the rolling hills of Northern Virginia sits a sprawling tree-lined campus. Classrooms inside this shuttered private school empty. Once busy halls are eerily silent, each room like a time capsule of better days. But not for long.
After much prayer and discussion with our elders and pastoral leadership, we will be launching Cornerstone Christian Academy.
With a campus about 20 miles from Cornerstone Chapel, the church will open the school in fall of 23.
But just kind of abandoned.
Yeah, I know.
Initially, there will be enough space for 500 elementary and middle school students.
Yeah, they have classrooms, desks, there's the gymnasium, there's a cafeteria down the hall. We're going to repurpose it for the Lord.
There are also plans to expand to high school and online learning.
Our goal is to provide children an education where they have a biblical worldview so that then they can go out into the real world and be salt and light.
The multi-million-dollar project is Pastor Gary Hamrick's response to what's playing out in public school systems across the country.
We find you and we know we'll never be able
in our schools. Kids are reading this, and you're going to tell me I can't read it to you?
The woman in the yellow trying to break up the fight.
3 students killed, 8 others shot.
I pledge allegiance to the queers.
Any religious tradition ascribes as God's will is no concern of this Congress.
You shut down a club for first graders studying the Bible. Do you feel good about that?
Yes, we do.
Loudoun is considered the face of the nation's culture war. For more than a year, parents railing against everything from sexual assault on campus.
Organizers say the walkout was to show solidarity to victims of sexual violence.
To critical race theory, X-rated books in school libraries.
They're perverted because there is no other rational or reasonable explanation.
And transgender policies.
It's abuse to a child, and it's sinning against our God.
Tanner Cross's dismissal for refusing to call students by preferred pronouns became the last straw for Hamrick.
Our kids need an alternative. We have to ourselves, as a church, get engaged. What can we do to help give a Christian-based, Christian biblical worldview education for our children?
Abby Platt, who saw 3 children suspended for not wearing masks at school, even though the state mandate was lifted, applied immediately.
LCPS has lost our trust, and we really want our children to be in an environment that is safe, where they will focus on literacy and learning instead of indoctrination.
Loudoun County schools have been the subject of so much controversy. Pastor Gary knew there'd be interest locally. What he didn't expect was to hear from parents in 27 states eager to enroll their children.
Cornerstone has been inundated with inquiries, and not just from parents. Teachers want out of public schools, too.
By the end of the week, we had over 2,500 students pre-registered. I got over 450 emails from teachers wanting employment.
The overwhelming response mirrors what appears to be a national trend. Nearly 2 million students left public schools between 2020 and 2021. With large numbers now enrolled in Christian education. Before the pandemic, many Christian schools struggled with low enrollment. Now there are waiting lists.
One of the things that came out of COVID was parents were looking over the shoulder of their kids as they were taking online classes and realizing some of this stuff that's being taught is against their own values, even if they weren't Christians.
E. Ray Moore, founder of the Conservative Christian Education Initiative, calls it a once-in-a-100-year moment.
It awakened in people, many Christians in churches and some pastors, the desire and the recognition that it's our responsibility to provide the Christian education of our children, not the government.
The Association of Christian Schools International, one of the country's largest networks, has seen double-digit growth since the pandemic hit. The Association of Classical Christian Schools has added some 10,000 students. The number of homeschoolers has doubled, and new Christian schools are popping up all over the country.
We're seeing a resurgence in homeschool co-ops and hybrid homeschools and learning pods, and both churches and communities and even cul-de-sacs of people that are becoming very creative in what is good quality Christian value-based education.
With many public schools mired in controversy, interest in Christian education is expected to keep rising.
Do you think that this is part of a revival or part of an awakening of people because things have gotten so contentious?
Yeah, it's definitely part of a revival that I hope sweeps across this nation in different ways, not just in terms of schools and education, but what is happening in our churches. The sleeping giant has been awakened, and parents begin to realize when their kids' future is at stake, we need to get involved.
Like many church leaders, Hamrick believes Christian schooling is no longer a nicety, but a necessity. In Middleburg, Virginia, Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Thank you, Tara. Coming up, a once-in-a-century race at the 148th Kentucky Derby ends with a bang. We'll show you and explain next. Finally tonight, last weekend marked the first Kentucky Derby with full attendance since 2019, not to mention the greatest upset in more than a century.
Rich Strike wasn't even entered in the race Friday morning, but by Saturday evening, the 80-to-1 long shot was a Derby champion. Rick Dawson found out his horse would be running in the Derby about 30 seconds before the deadline Friday morning. Less than 2 days later, one of the longest odds horses ever crossed the finish line, breezing from 17th to 1st in the final turn. Rich Strike's victory was the greatest odds upset since 1913, marking an exciting return to the fan favorite race. And it's something everybody's been talking about today, absolutely.
I'm afraid I missed out on all the drama. And just to think, 30 seconds before the race, you find out that your horse is going to run. Oh, what a phenomenal win.
Congratulations to him and to Rich Strike.
That's right.
Big news.
Well, thanks so much for watching this edition of Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.